Long before smartphones and smartwatches, there was a revolutionary time management system built not on pixels, but on prayer, precision, and the resonant clang of a bell. It shaped the medieval world, and its lessons are surprisingly potent for us today. You wake before dawn, though it's not your alarm that drags you out of dreams. It's the soft toll of a distant bell, a slow, measured sound that ripples through the cold stone walls of your borrowed monk's cell. You feel the chill cling to your bare feet as they touch the flagstones. Outside your narrow window, mist drifts over a cloistered courtyard, hugging statues and hedges like an old blanket that refuses to be folded away. You rub sleep from your eyes and catch your reflection in a polished copper basin. Hair sticking up, eyes half closed. A timeless look for a reluctant early riser. You probably won't make it through this day. But maybe that's the point. Here, in this small pocket of medieval calm, time doesn't bend to you. You bend to it. Before we get too far, a gentle nudge. If you like this quiet walk through centuries, tap that subscribe button and let the bells find you again, week after week. They've been ringing for centuries. They can wait a few seconds more. Outside your door, the monastery stirs. Candles flicker in alcoves, throwing gold halos on grey stone. You hear the shuffle of sandals, the soft murmur of half-whispered Latin prayers. This is the hour of matins, the first call to order the day. And here's your first lesson in time mastery. Medieval monks didn't just keep time, they lived by it. Every moment sliced and served according to bells, prayers, work, and silence. A major fact, the rule of St. Benedict, written around the 6th century, laid down strict schedules for monastic life. 8 prayer times, meals at precise hours, even naps arranged like clockwork centuries before clocks ruled cities. You pad along a drafty corridor, tracing your finger on rough stone, passing a niche where a single candle guards a battered hourglass. Scholars still debate whether early monasteries invented mechanical clocks outright, or refined ideas imported from the East, but they certainly made them practical. Past the courtyard, you glimpse Brother Anselm, hunched over a wooden desk, carving marks onto a wax tablet. He's tracking tasks for the day: feed the chickens, mend the garden wall, copy 3 more pages of Psalms before Vespers. Strange to think, but your to-do list app on your phone isn't so different. You stop under an archway, listening as the bell's final echoes fade. You feel the air settle, as if the stones themselves exhale. Here's your first weird tidbit. Some monasteries had bell towers so tall that the sound could drift across fields for miles, making sure even farmers at the far edge of the abbey lands knew when to stop hoeing and start praying. So you stand in your borrowed robe, feeling your breath mist in the dawn. A day sliced by bells awaits, and somehow, under these ancient timetables, life feels strangely manageable. You step into the cloister garden, where dawn's pale light slides over tidy rows of herbs: rosemary, sage, lavender. A monk in a brown robe kneels near the thyme, muttering a prayer as he snips sprigs for the kitchen. The air is sharp with the green scent of morning. You inhale it like it might make you holy, or at least more awake. You walk the worn flagstones in slow loops, the way generations of monks have done when thoughts grow too tangled. The bells have fallen silent for now, but you know they'll speak again soon, reminding everyone, time waits for no one, not even the pious. A major fact, Medieval monasteries were some of Europe's first centers of organized labor and time management. The monks' strict routines influenced townsfolk too. Farmers, millers, bakers began shaping their workdays to the monastery bells ringing across valleys. You lean against a stone column and watch as Brother Thomas wrestles with a stubborn goose near the fountain. The bird flaps, honks, resists its destiny as lunch. You stifle a laugh. Time may be sacred here, but geese are not on the schedule side. The soft drizzle starts, beading on the carved heads of saints. Remember that courtyard you crossed earlier? It's now dotted with small puddles that mirror the arches overhead. You stand there, enjoying how even the weather feels planned. A slow rinse before the next bell. Here's your strange tidbit. Some medieval abbeys employed lay brothers, whose main job was to handle the dirty work, farming, cleaning, ringing those relentless bells. They kept the choir monks focused on prayer, which, ironically, freed up spiritual time by outsourcing chores. Medieval productivity hack right there. You catch sight of the old sundial by the garden wall, faded markings, a simple gnomon casting its slim shadow. Long before watches, monks read the sun to adjust their daily schedule when clouds didn't get in the way, because the bell could only ring truthfully if someone knew what time it was. Historians still debate whether these routines made monks happier or just more tired. But you feel a quiet envy for this tidy division of hours. Work, worship, rest, like drawers that actually close. Brother Anselm reappears, wiping goose feathers from his robe. He nods at you, a silent reminder that the next bell is near. You follow him inside, feet wet from the drizzle, head oddly clear. Maybe this old, ringing rhythm holds something you could borrow. A tiny lesson from centuries past, humming just under the noise of your modern mind. You follow Brother Anselm through a narrow passage that smells of old wax and damp stone. The candle in his hand flickers, casting trembling shadows that dance along the walls like silent monks themselves. Somewhere ahead, a bell waits, and you know, though you pretend not to, that it will toll just as you sit down to rest. Time, after all, is not yours to command here. You step into the scriptorium, where warm lamplight spills across rows of wooden desks. The air is thick with the dry, musty perfume of parchment and ink. A dozen monks bend low over pages, their quills whispering secrets from one century to the next. You watch a droplet of ink slide from a nib and disappear into history. A major fact, these scriptoria were Europe's quiet engines of knowledge, preserving ancient texts through the so-called Dark Ages. By copying Roman and Greek works, monks handed down Aristotle, Virgil, and old herbal recipes, small handwritten time machines we still open today. You tiptoe between the desks, peering at the delicate curves of Latin letters, the swirling red illuminations that dance in the margins like tiny carnival acts amid serious prayers. One monk lifts his eyes, just long enough to give you a nod that says, "Yes, time is precious. Get back to work." Outside, the drizzle has become a steady drumbeat on the leaded glass windows. You remember the garden's sundial. Funny how these monks could measure time by sun, stars, candles, and bells, yet never quite trust any single one to behave. Medieval multitasking at its finest. A weird tidbit for you. Some monasteries kept elaborate water clocks, devices that dripped or trickled with painstaking precision so the bells could toll at exactly the right moment, an early attempt at automation centuries before we worried if robots would steal our jobs. You find a seat by a small window. In front of you, a battered book, a fresh quill, an inkwell, dark as sleep. Brother Anselm pats your shoulder. "Copy this," he gestures, before slipping away to check on the goose, perhaps. You dip your quill, but your mind drifts. You imagine your phone buzzing beside the parchment, notifications, reminders, little digital bells ringing in your pocket. Historians still debate whether monks found this endless copying joyful or soul-numbing. Some left behind margin notes complaining about the cold, the ink, the monotony, little medieval tweets scribbled for no one in particular. You scratch out a letter, then another. You think of your own list at home, emails to send, groceries to buy, projects that feel as long as a monk's scroll. Outside, the bell tower looms, waiting to slice this moment into neat pieces. You close your eyes and let the scratch of quills fill the air. Somewhere in this hush, you wonder if your own time could be this simple. Words, silence, and a bell to keep you honest. A hush falls over the scriptorium as the bell strikes again. Soft at first, then bolder, a bronze voice echoing through stone corridors. Every quill pauses. Heads bow. Time, it seems, has declared. Break. You stand, your back stiff from a work you barely started. But that's the point. Here, the bell knows best when it's time to stop. Outside, the drizzle has settled into a silver mist that hugs the abbey like an old friend who overstays but never annoys. You follow Brother Thomas this time, out past the courtyard where the puddles now mirror the bell tower in perfect upside-down clarity. He hums under his breath, a tune with no words, just notes to fill the gap between tasks. You wonder if he hums to keep time from slipping through the cracks. A major fact: by the 12th century, some monasteries had built mechanical clock towers that rang the hours automatically. The city of Salisbury had one by 1386, a medieval marvel of gears and weights, clanking away while monks tended gardens or copied psalms. You trail behind Thomas to the refectory, the dining hall where rough-hewn benches line long tables. The smell of barley soup drifts through the air, earthy and humble. You sit where you're told, feeling the ancient wood creak beneath you. A monk ladles soup into a clay bowl, nodding once before moving on. Here's a peculiar tidbit. Some abbeys trained dogs to turn spits over the fire so the brothers could roast meat without leaving their prayers. Canine kitchen help, the medieval productivity app you never knew you needed. You spoon warm broth into your mouth, watching the flicker of candles dance on ancient stone. The conversation is low, punctuated by the occasional cough or sneeze that echoes off the vaulted ceiling like a reminder that medieval life wasn't all tranquil bells and prayer. Historians still debate how strictly monks followed their daily rhythms. Some rules were broken more often than not. A nod to the fact that even the most disciplined among us drift when the world tugs too hard at our sleeves. You tear off a hunk of coarse bread, dipping it into the soup, imagining the thousands of quiet meals eaten here, each one marking the steady tick of a life well measured. You think about your own meals, fast, distracted, sometimes skipped altogether, while you scroll through another endless feed. A monk at the far table catches your eye and raises his bowl in a tiny toast. You smile back, soup warming your belly, wondering if the secret to managing time isn't more gadgets. Maybe it's a bell, a bowl, a break, and maybe, just maybe, a well-trained dog by the fire wouldn't hurt either. You push open the heavy wooden door of the refectory and step back into the cloister walk. The air smells of wet stone and distant hearth smoke. Another bell peals, not urgent, just insistent enough to remind you that time here is always moving, but never rushed. You tighten your cloak, feeling the damp chill slide between its folds. Brother Oswin is waiting by the archway, a tiny iron key dangling from his finger. He winks, like you're about to see something not on the usual pilgrim's tour. "The tower," he says, and gestures you to follow. You do, shoes squeaking on ancient flagstones polished by centuries of quiet feet. Up narrow stairs you go, each step a history of breathless monks and creaking boots. Your hand trails along the cold wall, fingers brushing moss that grows where sunlight never quite reaches. When you finally step out onto the bell tower landing, the world feels small below. Fields stretch away into the fog, sheep like punctuation marks in a pastoral sentence you'll never finish reading. A major fact: medieval bell towers weren't just about telling time. They announced market days, weddings, funerals, life's milestones hammered into air. In some towns, the bells rang warnings of fire or invaders, the original push notification, but with a bit more drama. Brother Oswin lifts the hatch. Inside, a massive bronze bell waits, dull green with age, yet regal in its quiet authority. Ropes dangle like serpents, coiled for use. He invites you to tug, and with a heave, the bell shudders. A deep, mellow note rolls out across the fields, the sheep looking up as if they too know time just shifted. A curious tidbit: some medieval bells were thought to ward off storms. When thunderclouds gathered, townsfolk might ring the biggest bell, hoping its sacred vibrations would scatter the skies. Medieval weather apps, they may not have worked, but at least they sounded lovely. Historians still debate exactly when the first large communal bells appeared in Europe, whether the idea spread from monastic orders or town guilds clamoring for order. But everyone agrees, once the bell rang, life obeyed. You lean against the tower's edge, looking down at the tiny garden you passed earlier. The sundial is useless now in the mist, but here above it, the bell cares nothing for the sun. Time must be told whether it shines or not. Brother Oswin rests his hand on your shoulder, steadying you against the wind. Below, you see the scriptorium's candlelit windows, the kitchen smoke drifting like a slow thought. The whole abbey is one big clockwork. Bells, candles, sun, stars, ticking gently while the world below spins much too fast. And you, modern keeper of calendars and digital reminders, stand here in borrowed silence. You wonder if your next alarm could ever feel this honest. Not a shrill demand, but a soft reminder that time is not your enemy if you learn to listen. Back on solid ground, you slip into the herb garden, your boots sinking into muddy pathways lined with wintering sage and rosemary. The bells behind you settle into quiet. You inhale deeply. The green tang of crushed thyme mixes with the faint sweetness of wet earth. Brother Bernard stoops among the rows, a basket looped over his arm. He hums a chant older than the language you speak, fingers brushing frost from tender leaves. He gestures for you to join him, and you do, though you doubt your modern hands know the first thing about coaxing medicine from weeds. A major fact: monasteries were Europe's pharmacies long before your corner drugstore. Monks cultivated herb gardens that supplied remedies for everything from stomach aches to plague sores, an herbal inheritance scribbled into leather-bound volumes still consulted today by curious gardeners and off-grid dreamers. You kneel by a patch of mint, plucking a sprig between your thumb and forefinger. Bernard nods approval, as if you've passed a small test. He drops a root into your palm. Angelica, he says, good for coughs and evil spirits alike. Double duty, like all the best time-saving hacks. A weird tidbit. Some monks believed rosemary placed under a pillow would banish nightmares. Medieval sleep tracking at its finest. No fancy app required, just a handful of aromatic twigs and a bit of blind faith. You follow Bernard down a winding path that leads back to the cloister walk. His sandals slap the stones in a patient rhythm, the same measured pace these monks use for everything. You realize, watching him, that time here is not about racing forward. It's about staying in step with what matters. A bell, a meal, a sprig of mint. Historians still debate how much practical medicine these medieval brothers really understood versus how much was spiritual hope wrapped in Latin prayers. But one truth persists. Their days were stitched together by small, intentional acts, weeding, tending, brewing, that turned hours into something more than passing shadows. You step back inside through an archway heavy with ivy. Bernard presses the herb basket into your hands. For the apothecary, he says. You nod, cradling it like a relic. You wonder what you'd harvest if your own life grew in tidy rows, what weeds you'd pull, what roots you'd cherish for their quiet power. Overhead, another bell strikes, not to hurry you, but to guide you, a reminder that time is not your boss. Here, in the hush of mortar and mint, time is an old companion, ready to teach you how to be on its side, if you'd only listen. You carry the herb basket through a narrow passage, its stone walls sweating with age. The candle in your hand flickers with every draught, throwing shadows that dance like medieval phantoms along the corridor. You half expect one to lean in, whispering secrets about how they managed to squeeze meaning from each fleeting hour. You step into the apothecary, a small chamber lined with wooden shelves, jars, and bundles of drying herbs that brush your shoulders as you pass. A mortar and pestle sits on a rough-hewn table, stained with the ghosts of past potions. You set the basket down and run your fingers over the smooth marble of the pestle, the weight of time itself. A major fact: medieval monks didn't just grow herbs. They recorded their recipes and cures meticulously, compiling some of the earliest medical texts in Europe. Their scribbled notes mixed superstition with observation, faith with experiment. Without them, who knows how long it would have taken to rediscover willow bark's pain-relieving powers, or mint's knack for calming an uneasy gut. You catch your reflection in a tiny, warped bronze mirror nailed to the wall, the only nod to vanity in a room designed to mend bodies, not flatter egos. Your hair's a mess, your eyes rimmed with candlelight. You look like a time traveler who's realized modern life is just medieval chaos dressed up in digital robes. A weird tidbit. Some monks believed that powdering emeralds and swallowing them could cure poison, a bright green solution that probably did more harm than good. But hey, medieval medicine was nothing if not colorful. Historians still debate how much real healing came from these apothecaries and how much was placebo and prayer. But for centuries, if you were sick, this was where you came. To this room of jars, roots, and whispered chants. Brother Peter joins you now, adjusting his woolen robe as he eyes your herb basket. He moves with a patient precision you envy. No rushing, no multitasking, no notifications buzzing in his ear. He plucks a sprig of sage, rubs it between his palms, inhales deeply. Good, he says, nodding as if you've contributed something vital to this living clockwork of care. You help him grind dried thyme, its sharp scent filling your nose. The pestle's rhythmic tapping echoes off the stone, blending with the soft murmur of the abbey beyond. You feel strangely soothed, each push and twist a tiny rebellion against your usual frantic to-do list. Here, the task is the moment, and the moment is enough. Brother Peter pours the powdered herb into a small cloth bag, tying it with twine. For the infirmary, he says. You follow him out, candle in hand, half expecting the corridor shadows to lean in once more, whispering that maybe you, too, could learn to treat time like medicine. You cross the cloister garden again, feet crunching on gravel, the herb bag warm against your palm. The bell overhead tolls for none, the 9th hour, roughly 3 in the afternoon for those of us not fluent in monastic time. The sound drifts over hedges and stone, blending with the rustle of crows perched on the abbey's slate roof. You pass a young novice kneeling by a rose bush, pruning with careful fingers. He looks up, smiles shyly, and goes back to coaxing blossoms into neat obedience. You envy him for a second, this quiet contract with nature, this patient barter of thorns for beauty. A major fact, medieval monasteries weren't just places of prayer, they were also horticultural marvels, breeding grounds for plants, orchards and vineyards. Many European fruit varieties owe their cultivation to monks who tended them like sacred texts. Apples, pears, grapes, edible testaments to time spent well. The novice gestures for you to sniff a newly opened rose. Its scent is startling, lush and heavy with sweetness. You lean in, brush your nose against soft petals, and for a heartbeat you forget alarms, deadlines, and late-night doom-scrolling. Just this rose, just this moment. A weird tidbit. Some monasteries trained bees to make honey for medicinal salves and mead, the original sweet reward for careful stewardship of thyme and flower. Historians still debate whether these gardens were as systematically planned as later botanical gardens, or more chaotic, each monk tending his corner like a private Eden. But no one denies their impact. Patient hands reshaping wildness into nourishment, year after year. The novice hands you a single petal. It's so delicate you half expect it to dissolve in your palm. But it doesn't. It stays there, soft and real, a tiny token of time handled gently. You tuck it behind your ear, feeling a bit foolish but strangely grounded. You move on past rows of lavender and chives nodding in the wind and slip into the stone corridor leading to the scriptorium. You pause at the door, hearing the soft scratch of quills on parchment. Inside, time isn't just tracked, it's recorded, line by careful line, so no moment is entirely lost to the hungry silence. You step in, adjusting to the gloom, candle flickering as your eyes scan rows of bent heads. Monks hunch over vellum, copying words that will outlast them by centuries. Somewhere, someone coughs. Someone murmurs a prayer to keep ink from smudging. You sit at an empty desk, the herb bag still warm beside your elbow. You reach for a quill. You don't write yet. You just listen. The scratching, the breathing, the pages turning. It's not silent here. It's alive with the sound of time being made solid. Outside, the bell strikes again. Soft, steady. Not an alarm, not a demand, just a promise. You are here, now. And that is enough. You dip the quill into the inkwell, its surface shimmering like a tiny black pond. A droplet clings to the nib as you hover over the parchment. Blank, intimidating, full of promise. You hesitate. Somewhere in the modern world, your phone would already be buzzing, your calendar full of polite reminders that feel more like threats. But here, the ink decides the pace. You scratch the first letter, slow and careful. The quill rasps softly, a tiny sound swallowed by the stone walls and the collective breath of scribes bent over their own careful lines. Every letter is a small rebellion against forgetting, a vow that some part of today, this moment, will outlive the candle's flame. A major fact, medieval scriptoriums like this one copied not only sacred texts, but also classical works, Aristotle, Galen, Cicero, which might have been lost without these quiet, ink-stained rooms. Whole civilizations remembered by monks who probably never imagined the internet. A weird tidbit. To make ink, they used gall nuts, iron salts, and gum arabic, a messy, smelly brew that stained fingers and robes alike. There were even scribes who left tiny notes in the margins, complaints about cold hands, cramped backs, or the stubbornness of stubborn quills. Historians still debate whether monks truly understood the magnitude of their preservation work, or simply saw it as daily duty, like tending the garden, ringing the bell, or feeding the chickens. Yet here you sit, your quill scratching alongside 1,000 invisible hands. Your mind drifts as you write. You imagine yourself back at home, hunched over your laptop, fingers flying over keys. The tap, 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 so different from this scratch, scratch, scratch. Faster, sure, but does fast mean better? You glance at the candle, its flame dancing as if it's giggling at you. Hurry if you must, but ink still dries at its own stubborn pace. A novice sneezes. Someone chuckles under their breath. You catch your reflection in a polished brass candlestick. A time traveler out of place. Ink on your fingers, time on your mind. You wonder if you'll remember this small detail when you're scrolling later, promising yourself you'll slow down tomorrow. The bell rings for vespers, evening prayers. You lay down the quill, flex your stiff fingers. The parchment is no longer blank. Your words, your mark, your minute claimed. You rise, careful not to smudge the wet lines, and slip the page into a drying rack where others, like it, wait to become history. You step into the twilight cloister, shadows pooling like spilled ink between the stone arches. The breeze smells of lavender and old parchment. You smile, because tomorrow you'll do it all again. Scratch out a tiny piece of forever, one letter at a time. You follow the monks to the chapel, footsteps hushed on worn stone. The evening light filters through narrow stained glass windows, splashing color on rough walls, ruby, emerald, a splash of gold. Candles flicker in iron sconces, their flames dancing to the slow chant that swells as the brothers find their places. You slip into a shadowed corner. The hymn rises and falls, a tide of voices lapping gently at your modern, restless mind. You close your eyes, letting the Latin roll over you, words you don't fully grasp, but somehow understand all the same. A major fact: the monastic day was divided into 8 canonical hours, each marked by prayer and ritual. The system shaped not just spiritual life, but daily rhythms for countless communities. A clock made of voices and vows, more binding than any wristwatch. A weird tidbit: some monks dozed off during long vigils, so rules were written about not snoring too loudly. Holy snoring, the original workplace distraction. Historians still debate how rigidly every monastery kept to this sacred timetable. Some houses were famously strict, others, well, they bent a bell or two when harvests were pressing, or snow blocked the paths to the chapel door. You open your eyes. The flicker of candlelight catches on the gold thread of a tapestry behind the altar, a scene of saints and scholars, their embroidered faces serene, hands frozen in blessing. You wonder how many evenings they've watched over restless minds like yours. You study the monks. Their faces are calm but not empty, their eyes open and focused, their voices blending without hurry. No frantic scrolling here. No inbox pings or pop-up reminders, just breath and word and flame. Your knees ache on the cold stone floor, but you don't move. The chant winds down. Silence settles like soft cloth over the chapel. The bell strikes again, low and patient, folding the day into night with gentle finality. You stand, bones creaking. You're not sure if you prayed or just listened, but maybe that's the same thing tonight. You slip out into the courtyard, the air fresh and sharp with coming frost. Overhead, stars prick the velvet dark, a map of endless minutes and years you'll never fully read. A small smile curls at the corner of your mouth. Somewhere, far away, your phone screen glows in the dark. Alarms ready, reminders waiting to shout. Here, though, the only alarm is a bell, ancient and forgiving. You think maybe tomorrow you'll listen for it. In the silence between tasks, that gentle toll that says, time is yours, if you dare claim it. You walk the cloister again, this time under a cold moon. The stones remember 1,000 footsteps, sandals, boots, bare feet creeping to prayers at impossible hours. The air hums with leftover chants, soft as moth wings. You pause beside an ancient oak door, its iron hinges groaning like an old man's knees when the wind shifts. Inside, a single candle flickers in the scriptorium you left earlier. A lone brother still at work, hunched over a sheet of vellum, eyes half-lidded with sleep and devotion. You envy him a little, the way he bends time with ink and patience, unbothered by a million distractions. A major fact: by the late Middle Ages, monasteries weren't just spiritual sanctuaries. They were Europe's engines of literacy, copying manuscripts, translating knowledge, preserving ideas that might have vanished in fire and war. Without their quiet labor, whole libraries would have turned to ash in the winds of empire. A weird tidbit: some scribes scribbled jokes in the margins, little doodles of snails fighting knights, or a monk wrestling a giant fish, proof that even the devout needed a chuckle between amens. Historians still debate how many scribes worked purely for faith versus those who earned their bread with every letter. Faith and coin, a holy partnership older than your favorite productivity apps. You lean your shoulder against the doorframe. The cold seeps through your tunic. You imagine your modern desk, ergonomic chair, blue light screen, digital notes cluttered with tasks you never check off. Here, the only to-do list is carved in prayer times and bell chimes, an organic planner made of stars, sun, and the steady beating of a monastery's heart. The brother lifts his head. You see the raw rim of candlelight halo his tonsured scalp, the clean circle, hair shorn to remind him where heaven sits. You wonder what you'd look like in the mirror if every worldly thought was trimmed away, leaving only the bare skull of intention. The candle gutters. He dips his quill, scratches one last line, then carefully closes the ink pot. He bows to the parchment as if it's an altar. Maybe it is. He rises, joints creaking, nods at your shadow in the doorway like you're both part of some midnight pact. You step aside to let him pass. He smiles, just enough teeth to remind you that monks are human too, prone to dreams of warmth, soup, maybe a small sip of something stronger when the abbot's not looking. You watch him vanish down the hall, robes brushing stone, leaving you alone with ink ghosts and your own unfinished thoughts. You wonder, what's worth copying in your life? What words, what truths, what habits are worth duplicating over and over in neat lines that might outlast the next fleeting hour? Dawn again, soft and sly, brushing your cheeks like a cat testing for warmth. The bell calls before the sun fully wakes, a hollow bronze voice that pulls you from sleep deeper than dreams. You rise, bones complaining. No snooze button here, just the hush of footfalls as monks drift like wraiths toward the chapel. You follow, feet numb against cold flagstones. Somewhere a lone rooster tries to compete with the bell. He fails. The bronze always wins. A major fact. Medieval bell towers evolved into mechanical clock towers, the first public timekeepers that didn't just ring but counted hours with iron gears. Monks taught towns how to listen to hours, not just moments, a gift we still abuse with our buzzing phones. A weird tidbit. Some early clocks had no faces, only bells. If you wanted to know the time, you had to stop and listen. No peeking, no silent scrolling under the table during meetings. Historians still debate who built the first true mechanical clock. Italians, English monks, or crafty German tinkerers all claim bragging rights. Like most good inventions, it probably came from more than one restless mind. You step inside the chapel. The same cold stone, the same warm breath of candlelight. A novice clutches the rope of the bell high in its tower, waiting for the abbot's nod. When it comes, he pulls, a full-bodied tug that shudders down the rope and up your spine. The sound blooms overhead, time's heartbeat amplified. The chant begins again, a ritual echo of hours stitched together like pages of a well-loved book. You stand near the back, eyes half closed, mouth shaping words you don't quite know but trust will carry you forward. Your mind drifts, not far, just sideways, into the thin crack where old and new collide. You imagine the same bell rope pulling you awake at home, dragging you out of bed with purpose instead of panic. You picture your phone's alarm replaced with a single toll, calm, clear, impossible to ignore. The monk at the bell watches you watching him. He smiles, the barest tilt of lips conspiratorial, as if to say, time's not the enemy, just a guest you keep too busy to sit down. The chant swells. You breathe deep, Let it soak into your bones. You think, maybe you'll remember this tomorrow. This sound, this hush, this chance to treat your minutes like gold leaf instead of loose change dropped under a couch cushion. When the last note fades, the novices bow. You bow too, a stranger in borrowed robes, blessing your own tomorrow with the promise of one more honest hour, rung out in bronze and dawnlight. You step back into the courtyard, where frost clings to the herbs like the last reluctant guests at a feast. The sun finally lifts its head above the cloister walls, throwing gold onto stone and warming your eyelids. A breath steams from your lips. For a heartbeat, you feel timeless, stitched into this hour like a single thread in a vast tapestry. You drift toward the kitchen garden, following the muffled chatter of lay brothers gathering greens for the day's meal. Bent backs, rough hands, soil under nails. A holy ritual, hidden in the humdrum. You stoop beside them, fingers brushing thyme, rosemary, old mint pushing through tired earth. A major fact: medieval monastic gardens weren't just for carrots and cabbage. They held medicinal herbs too. Sage for sore throats, rue for bad dreams, fennel to calm a roiling stomach. Some cloisters were Europe's first hospitals, where monks doubled as herbalists, stitching wounds of both body and soul. A weird tidbit: in one abbey's old recipe book, there's a note that monks believed leeks could purge evil humours if chopped at dawn. Imagine your modern breakfast smoothie with that kind of promise. Historians still debate how much real medical knowledge the monks preserved versus how much was hopeful trial and error. Either way, they tilled earth as if each seed was a prayer. You straighten up, palms earthy, watching a novice feed scraps to a rooster, strutting like he owns every sunrise. He pecks, crows, struts again. A feathery overseer of dawn routines. You envy him for a moment. No to-do list, no calendar app, just instinct and an inner clock louder than any bell. You drift to the well at the garden's edge. Cold water shivers down the rope as you haul up a bucket, splashing your face awake. The chill reminds you that time's river never pauses. It just carves new paths in your bones when you're not paying attention. The brothers nod as you pass. You're an odd guest, lingering longer than any pilgrim, yet they accept you all the same. Maybe you're one more soul needing gentle structure, an hour rung in bronze, a day sliced neatly by work, rest, prayer. You pause at the herb plot again. Crush a sprig of rosemary between thumb and forefinger. The scent lifts you to a memory you can't quite name. A grandmother's soup, a garden you never tended, a promise you still owe yourself. You pocket the sprig. Maybe you'll plant it back home, a small root for a bigger change. You walk on, rosemary clutched like a quiet charm, and the bells toll again. A polite nudge that, yes, the day moves on, and so must you. You wander into the workshop. Sawdust drifts like pollen in a shaft of sunlight. Mallets tap, chisels scrape. Monks with sleeves rolled, sweat on brows, shaping wood that might outlive them all. The scent of fresh-cut oak mixes with the sweet sting of resin. You stand at the threshold, half tempted to grab a tool and join them. A major fact: monasteries weren't just spiritual factories. They were economic engines too. Their carpenters built furniture, ploughs, coffins, and entire barns. Some orders grew so skilled, their joinery spread far beyond cloister walls, fueling local markets and paying debts that prayers alone couldn't settle. A weird tidbit. Some monks secretly carved tiny faces or animals into beams and choir stalls, small jokes to remind future generations that faith never meant abandoning mischief entirely. Historians still debate how much individual monks benefited from this labor. Did their hands earn them secret favors, or merely keep them humble and busy under strict rule? You trail a fingertip along a half-carved bench, feeling the shallow groove where a chisel hesitated, then bit deeper. A monk catches your eye. Thick arms, gentle smile, a soft grunt of greeting. He gestures at the tools, raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Want to help shape your own time?" You laugh, shaking your head, but part of you aches to say yes. To trade blinking screens for calloused palms, vague schedules for wood that yields under honest effort. You watch him work, a rhythm older than clocks, each strike of the mallet an exhale of doubt. He pauses now and then, wipes his brow, hums a hymn you half remember from morning prayers. It mingles with the hush of the bell tower in the distance, two tempos of the same ancient heartbeat. You notice scraps of wood underfoot, curling shavings that look like runes. You wonder what message they'd spell if you could read them. Slow down. Shape what matters. Leave the rest for firewood. The bell rings again, a softer tone this time, calling monks to midday meal. The carpenter wipes his blade, sets it down, nods at you like a master forgiving his apprentice's daydreams. He steps outside and you follow, blinking in the light, scent of sawdust and rosemary trailing behind. As you cross the threshold, you glimpse the courtyard you passed through this morning. Same frost, same stones, warming now under a gentler sun. Remember that patch of herbs? Still growing, still waiting for hands that remember how to tend them. One more chime, one more step, one more chance to carve your own groove deeper and better than before. You stand again in the cloister's covered walkway, the arches framing your view like windows into a quieter world. The stones beneath your feet are warm now, sunlit and patient, holding centuries of footsteps and whispered confessions. A slow breeze slips through the arches, stirring your robe, or maybe it's your coat. You've worn so many borrowed skins on this walk through borrowed time. You pause by a weathered bench, sit, let your shoulders drop. You feel the press of rosemary in your pocket, a tiny sprig that insists you'll carry this hour with you, whether you want to or not. The bells above hush for a moment, the silence thick and generous, like a breath before sleep. A major fact, some monastic orders, like the Cistercians, perfected water clocks and elaborate systems of bells to mark the liturgy of the hours, an entire orchestra of timekeeping, centuries before mechanical clocks conquered city towers. Their bells shaped not just faith, but commerce, labor, even the pace of peasant fields around them. A weird tidbit. There are stories that in certain cloisters, a mischievous novice would sneak up and ring the bell early to shave minutes off tedious work duty. Tiny rebellions, hidden in bronze echoes. Historians still debate whether these monastic bells truly tamed medieval time, or simply wrapped it in layers of ritual. Was it freedom, or a cage shaped like devotion? You lean back, watch a lone swallow dart under the eaves. The carpenter's hum still flickers in your ear, a tune for slow hours. You remember the scriptorium's hush, the garden's frost, the steam from your breath, the patient pulse of footsteps on cold stone. This place isn't a relic, it's a blueprint, hidden in plain sight. You wonder if the ancient monks knew they were shaping a map for the future. For you, the startled guest who wandered in looking for secrets to tame a restless mind. You stand again, one more lap before you go. The courtyard arches frame the same path, yet it feels new. A single bell chimes, softer now, less command and more invitation. Start again. You walk. Feel your pulse match its rhythm, a quiet drum reminding you that your hours are yours, if you dare carve them carefully enough. As the last chime fades, you linger. The sun dips toward dusk, pouring honeyed light across the cloister walls, staining old stones with warmth. Shadows grow long, stretching like sleepy cats across worn flagstones. You breathe in the garden's last green exhale. Rosemary, thyme, a trace of mint crushed under a novice's heel. You hear faint voices echo through the hall, laughter carried down corridors older than your name. You remember the cold well water on your skin, the hush of the scriptorium's turning pages, the carpenter's chisel shaping not just wood, but the hush between the bells. Your mind drifts. How many minutes have you squandered counting seconds instead of carving them? How many days have you let slip like scraps of wood, wasted shavings on a floor you forgot to sweep? Here, in this softened dusk, you promise yourself a smaller rebellion, a slower breath, a single sprig of rosemary planted in your windowsill, a borrowed bell inside your chest that rings not to rush you, but to remind you, this hour too is yours. So you stand once more. Let the arches frame you like an ancient painting. Feel the hush deepen as the courtyard darkens. A final bell tolls, not an alarm, not an end, just an invitation to rise tomorrow and shape your time with gentler hands. You step forward, pockets warm with memory. The stones behind you hold your footsteps. The quiet keeps your secret. And somewhere in the dusk, the bells promise you this. When you wake, time will be yours to master again, one slow chime at a time.